welcome back to this new tutorial, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create a simple API with two endpoints, get and post, using Node.js Express. So let's get started. And first of all, we need to have Node.js installed on our computer. So if you don't have Node.js installed on your computer, you need to navigate to their site. This is the website for Node.js, and you can just go ahead and download Node.js on your computer. Don't worry, I will drop the link in the description so that you can just use the link and download the Node.js on your machine. So I don't need to download it. I have already downloaded on my computer. This is it. I have Node.js version 20.18.0 and it's COVID. So let's try and install this Node.js on our computer. So this is it. I'll just click on next. So it is asking me to change, repair, or remove. This is happening because I already have Node.js installed on my computer. So if you don't have it, you'll see something different there. It is very simple. The process is whole accurate. All you need to do is read the instructions and install Node.js on your computer. So me, I'm not going to reinstall or change or repair this Node.js because I have already have it and it is working perfectly. So let me just go ahead and cancel this, and I'll just click on finish. So next, let's check and see if this Node.js exists on our computer. So now, to check if Node.js is installed successfully on your computer, all you need to do is run this command: node-version. See, this is how to check if the Node.js you install on your computer it is successfully installed. You can check it by running the command I just entered, node-version. Then in my own case, I have version 20.18.0. So now that we already have Node.js installed in our computer, we need to create a directory that we are going to organize our codes inside. So now I'm going to create a directory using command prompt using mkdir, and I will pass the name of the directory. I'll just say API or JS API. So and I will also navigate to that directory using the cd command, cd JS API. So since I already navigate into the JS API, all I have to do is make an initialization to the folder using the npm command. Npm init, then -y. So don't worry, you don't need to install npm. Once you install your Node.js, it is going to also install the npm for you. As you can see in the list of the Node.js distance, you can see that it is going to include the npm version 10.9.0. So you don't need to bother about installing npm. Once you install your Node.js, it is also going to install npm. So let's go ahead and initialize the folder. So now that we make this initialization, it has already created a file in that the same directory, package.json. So, and these are the stubs inside the this thing, package.json. Then we also need to install Express. So Express is a backend framework for Node.js, and we needed to build these APIs. So, and we have to install it using the npm install Express. So it's going to take some few seconds. In just a second, it's going to install, depending on how your computer is processing. It is still installing. Yeah, so it is already done, and let's view this directory inside our Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code to write the whole code, but you can also use other editors or IDEs to do it, depending on the one that suits or you are comfortable with. But in this tutorial, I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code to do it. So I can just view the directory inside my Visual Studio Code. So now these are the files. This is a directory that contains some of our things after installing the Express related to our backend, and we also have this package log.js and package.json. They are all bunch of JSON things. We don't need to bother about them for now. The next thing we need to do is create a file that we are going to write our JavaScript code. So I'm going to create a file named index.js. This is where we are going to create the whole API and the whole endpoints. So first of all, I need to create a constant variable that's going to store our express. I will use the const keyword and I will declare this variable as express. Then I will use the require function and then pass express inside. Then the next thing, we need our app. We need a variable that is going to store our app, and that app is going to hold the express in it. Instead of us calling the express direct, we are going to pass it inside a variable called app. Const app. Then we now pass our express there. The next thing, we also need to create port. So this port is going to be the port that our API endpoints are going to be listening to. As we have a lot of, and we have apart from your domain or your host, which is in our case we are going to be using our local host, we also need a port number that the API is going to be reading on. So I'm going to declare this port number, and I want it to be running on 3000. Sorry. So this is it. So next we need middlewares to pass JSON bodies. So to do that, we need to call our app, then call the use method and pass our express.json. So this is it, and we also need to ask our app to listen to our port. So we now call the app and use the listing method. Then our port is going to be the first parameter. Then we are going to use arrow function. Yeah. So in the arrow function, all we need to do is just console.log something to our terminal so that we know that the server is running. We now console.log, and I'm going to use the format string and print this on print server is running on. Then I will now specify the address. Then I will now pass the port number to that address. So I'll use the http :/localhost then port. Then I will now use the format string from JavaScript. Then I now pass my port number, like this. So this is how it's just going to be, and let's test this and see if our API is well set and we don't have any issues in it. So now to run this server, all we need to do is use the Node.js that we installed, the node command, and then the name of the file the name of our file, which is in my case, or in our case, it is Node.js. It is index.js. So let me just save it and go back to my terminal. Then I'll now run this command node, then index.js. This is the name of the file, index.js. So it is now showing us that the server is running on this local address that I just passed, and this is the port number that I pass. I just nested it as a format string, so I passed the port number inside. Then it is showing that it is running on localhost port for 3000. Okay, so let's go and test this on the browser. Let's test this in our browser and see. So if I now run localhost for 3000, so you see we are getting a response from our API. That means the API is working, and the reason why it is showing us that cannot get this blah 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 is because we did not create any endpoint. So it's just the aim is just for us to create to test the API and see whether it is working perfectly without any issues. And we can also see the logs. If we check our console.log, you see that it is just failing status powerful, that the route is not found. Is because we don't have any endpoint there. Okay, so now let's try and create a simple endpoint using get that is going to just display welcome to my API. So in order to do that, all we need to do is call the app variable again and then look for get method. So in the get, the first parameter we are going to pass is going to be the route that we are going to navigate to. In our case, going to whenever we navigate to /API, whenever we navigate to /API, it is going to redirect us to this get method that I'm going to call. So in this arrow function that I'm going to call, we pass two parameters. The first parameter is going to be our request. Then we also need a variable that is going to store our responses. So this is it, and I'm going to use the res.json, the response. Once it gets the response that is going to display in the browser is going to turn it into JSON format, and then the key is going to be message, and then the message that I'm going to pass to the browser, like welcome to my API. So this is it. Let's test this route. Let's test this route and see. If I save it and let me shut down the server and run it again, so that it will update the changes. And let's go back to our browser and add /API. So you see we are now getting that response successfully, welcome to my API. So we are not going to be using browser to be testing all these APIs. I'm going to be using Postman for our API test. So Postman, if you don't know what Postman is a platform for testing API endpoints. You can test all your APIs and access them, and everything you want to do related to API, you can do it on Postman. So there is a lot of platforms available there online for APIs. If you are familiar with one, you can use it. But in this tutorial, I'm going to be using Postman platform to test all those APIs. So let's also test this API. So to test this API on Postman, all we need to do is to pass our URL. In our case, our URL is just this HTTP localhost port 8000, and I'm also going to pass it in this input here. Once I pass the URL, and in this case, you can also in Postman you can also choose the method, like post if you want to post a data, put if you want to update a data or patch, then delete, or maybe options, a lot a lot of requests that you want to post using your API, you can just say, in this case, this endpoint that we just create is a get method, remember. So it's going to be, once I just pass the get method and set slash API, it is going to just display a response saying welcome to my API. So this is it. So now let's go ahead and create a post method that is going to allow us to, we are going to create an endpoint that is going to allow us to register users, and then after that we are going to also create an endpoint that is going to allow us to get all those users. So now let's create those endpoints. So I'm going to create another route again, and this one is going to be .post, and it's going to be whenever we navigate to slash API slash user slash add, it's going to allow us to add the user. And just like the other endpoint that we create, we also need to get the response. The parameter is going to get our request, then our response, and we now pass our this thing, our arrow function. So what we are going to do here, in order to create, since we are not working with database now, we can just create a list that is going to store those data and allow us to access those data, but only on this session. Don't worry, in the future I will create another tutorial that's going to allow us to store those users in a database, but for now we are just going to store them in a list and access them. But once you shut down the server and run the server, you'll not be able to find any users again. So this is just a temporary. I'm going to create a variable const, a variable called users, and it's going to be an empty list. So this is where I'm going to be storing all the users. So I'll now move on to the API. I'm going to also create I'm also going to create a variable const, a variable that is going to store a keys of entities, constant, a keys in a dictionary. Let's say we need a user we need the name of that user, and we also need his let's say let us just say username and password, username and password. This is all the work we need. Then we also need to pass that request to the body, request dot body is going to be in the body of our endpoint. Then the next thing we are going to do is also create a variable that is going to continuously get those users and increment the ID, then push it to our list. So I will now create a new const variable. I will name it let's say new user, and I'm going to create a dictionary sorry, an object. I'm going to create an object. First key is going to be our ID. So this ID is going to be auto increment, is going to be incrementing. So whenever we add new user, if it is 1, it's going to increment by 1, and then keep incrementing until we are done adding users. So the ID is going to be incrementing by 1, 2, 3, 4 up to the last length we have in our list. Now I will now tell it to increment by 1. Then I also need the username. Then is the username. Then I also need the password. Sorry, this is not going to be semicolon. It's supposed to be comma not semicolon. So then these are the entities we need. I think these are just the things we already add. Sorry, this is not this is not column, is semicolon. Then I'm going to lastly call that user variable list dot push. So it will now push that new users that we create, that new user that we create in the list. And lastly, I want you to return a response. And this response is going to be from the response that we already create in our parameter. This is it, this response. Then it's going to get the status. The status is going to be let's just say 200 for success. Then JSON, then it's going to turn the data into JSON format. Then we now pass our key message, and this message is going to be new user created, or let us just say user created successfully. Then we also need a variable that is going to store that new user that we created. Then I now create a key and set user and name it user. Then I will just pass that new user that I just created in it. And lastly, I will lock my semicolon. I will terminate the statement with semicolon, and I also terminate this with semicolon. So I think this endpoint is good to go. So let's test it in our Postman and see. So let me shut down the server and run it again so that it will take the updates. So I'll just change the endpoint should be user/add. Then in order to add this data in Postman, we need to navigate to body, this entity here, body. Then we will now turn it to row and leave it as JSON as it is. Then we now pass the format should be in a JSON format. So remember, we have a key username. So under this key username, we need to pass a username. Let me just say like bin002 as my username. Then I also need another one for password. And this password, we can just say 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. So this is just it, and remember, we have to change the method. It's going to post, but because this time we are not getting the data, we are posting that data. So let's run it and see. So it works successfully, and here is our response: user created successfully. Here is the ID, here is the user, and here is password. So let's try adding another user and see. Let's say we have at me 991. Let's just leave it the same password and post it. You see at me and the ID 22. Let's add another one at try one more. Let's just say just a random username, and let's post it. So now we have already created this post successfully. We have no issues with it. So that means where the post method, the post URL endpoint that we created is working successfully. So the next thing we need to do is create an endpoint that is going to get all those users that we registered. Remember, if I shut down the server and I run it again, we are not going to find any users because we just pass it in a temporary list. We are not working with database, and we are not working with session storage. So these data, they are stored in that list temporarily, just a session. So for now, let's just create the endpoint that is going to get those users. So we can just use app.get. It's going to use get method, and we also need to add the route. So once we navigate to /API/users/all, then we will now pass the parameters, which is first is going to be request and response. Then we now pass our arrow function. So now our response is going to just turn this list data to a JSON format. So we can just pass the rest and use JSON format. In the parameter of the JSON, we are going to pass our users list. So once we navigate to this, it is going to just get us an objects, a list of objects of users that we register. So let us also test this and see. We have to shut down the server and then refresh it in order to get updates. So let's test it. If I now navigate to /all, and remember it is /users, and we also have to change the method to get, not post, because we are getting the data now, not posting the data. So you see we have empty list. So if I now navigate to this add and add some users, let me just add this, and let me add another one, me 00102. Post it, and then let's add another user, maybe let's say pin 002. Let's pass it in. So you see I add all those datas, and let's try getting those datas and see. Sorry, we have to change the method to get, because we are not posting the data, we are getting the data. So you see these are the list of users we already created. So this is it for this tutorial. If you have any question, you can just comment on the comment section below, and then and don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Only if you like it, it's going to motivate me to come out with more videos. So thank you.